Hey, and welcome to Connections, Coffee, and Confidence with me, Janice. This week I had the absolute pleasure of meeting with some of the women in my Facebook group who joined me for the goal setting co-working session. It was an awesome opportunity to try setting goals for the next quarter and just setting a greater overall intention for 2022. So far, the feedback has been really positive, but it got me to thinking about basics. And as an avid reader, I thought I'd do a list of my 6 favorite books relating to business, the ones I just keep going back to again and again. And I'm wondering, how many of these have you read?
Hi, I'm Janice Fogarty, and I'm a communications strategist and consultant. The Connections, Coffee, Confidence podcast is for professional women entrepreneurs who have established themselves and their business, and they're ready to get serious about using the power of communication to surpass their business goals. On this podcast, I discuss everything from leadership to establishing a business vision to the intricacies of creating messaging, publicity, and more. I speak to women who excel in communications in their business, whatever they do, and get an inside look at how they created a thriving livelihood. So top up your mug and welcome to this week's episode.
Now, are you a reader or do you do audiobooks? For a podcaster, it might be reasonable to assume that I'd go the audio route, but I really like having paper in my hands. It feels better to me. But I know that some of these books you can get on YouTube as an audiobook, one in particular with the author reading it, which makes it feel like more of an immersive, a real experience. All of these are linked in my show notes. I'll just reassure you up front so I don't need to say it each time. Now, the first book on my list is Brendon Burchard's High Performance Habits: How Extraordinary People Become That Way. Brendon is a high performance coach, and what I like about him is that he isn't just full of feel-good stories and a push for you to buy things. He takes his money and he invests in the data to find out why things are the way they are. This book was the result of a massive study of high performers, who he defines as succeeding beyond standard norms consistently over the long term. He found that these people totally know and value their strengths, but they don't focus on them. They actually look at what they're missing and define how that lack affects their performance or their ability to provide value to their personal life, to their business, or their community. Those high performers look to see how they can continue growing, stretching themselves just a little bit further in order to be better and do better. This book is, and yet isn't, an easy read. It's not a snuggle in bed with a cup of tea read. It's a mark off an hour in your work day and bring a highlighter, pen and paper because you're going to have work to do. It's well written and logical to follow. You don't need to read the whole thing cover to cover to start taking action. You can take it one chapter at a time, and I guarantee you'll find things to incorporate or change in your life and business. I periodically return to this book, and I've recommended it to so many people, including you. Second book on my list is Chillpreneur by Denise Duffield Thomas. This is a book you could sit with a cuppa and read all the way through, then go back and work at what you need in the moment. If you haven't heard of her, she's a money mindset mentor from Australia, and she has a laid-back and easy way of delivering information, hence the fitting name, Chillpreneur. She has mantras and exercises and thoughts derived from her own experiences building wealth and mentoring other entrepreneurs through the same process. I read this book on our trip across Canada when I had a moment to myself and I just wanted to do something quiet. But I go back to it because Denise makes things easy. When I feel worried or start to stress out that I'm not doing things the right way the first time, or I start to feel that fear of missing out. You know FOMO, right? Reading this book makes me feel like I can breathe again. I find this book helps me relax into what I sometimes make really more of a big deal than it is, or really hard, like much harder than it needs to be. And if you need some of that in your business or your life, Denise Duffield Thomas's Chillpreneur, that's the book for you. Third up is Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass at Making Money. Yes, it was a close tie with You Are a Badass, the book that started the series, but I liked this book because it's that delightful mix of woo and tough talk, of self-reflection and projection that I think makes dealing with the topic of money easier to swallow. In pointing out the things that Jen admits to being guilty of in the past, or outlines in her clients' stories that are dotted throughout as having happened, it's easier to see and admit to the same behaviors. I think one of the best parts of the book describes when her thinking goes from no way to there must be a way. And the logic and the reasoning that flows from that realization makes a really great read. You can read this in one go, but you might have too much to think about to do it smoothly. The first time I read it, I found I needed to stop and think. A lot. I tried half-heartedly at some of the exercises. I stuck with a mantra or two faithfully, and they were like my building blocks to go back and read it a second time, and work at the exercises, one at a time. Every time I read this book, I find another nugget that speaks to me more loudly than it did before. And this is the one that is narrated by the author on YouTube. So if you're an in-the-bath thinker or a verbal processor, this could be the way for you to go. It's not a difficult read. It's not filled with magic and mysticism. There's a decent amount of acknowledging the woo and the leap of faith one has to make in order to change one's mindset. The work you have to do to make things actually happen for you. But it's a great place to start and carry on from if you're opening up to the possibility of money mindset work. I feel like I need to point out that Denise Duffield Thomas is great for this as well. I mean, it's what she does. I just went with Chillpreneur for her because it was the business book that I had read, and I haven't read her others around money mindset. Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand is number 4 on my list because it's wonderful. You could sign up for his 3-day workshop for, a few $1,000, or you can read this book and continue listening to this podcast and get the basics sorted out for yourself. I read this book for pleasure. This was a cup of tea with a snuggly blanket read for me because I love communications theory and messaging and strategy and all that jazz. However, this is probably one you want to have your business mind focus on, as it's incredibly insightful to the mechanics and the why of stories and messaging, how they're so important for every business. It's not difficult to read. It's quite straightforward, quite reasonable as a business read. It helps you sort out your mindset around how and what you communicate, and I love that. But because of that, it might be a bit slow going as you process what the information means for you and how you create and integrate your communication strategy to your normal course of business. I'll throw in there that you can always book in a session with me if you'd like a more hands-on approach to your communication strategy. You can email me at janice@janicefogarty.com and we can get to work on that for you. But if you have some downtime coming and you'd like a good read about communications, Building a Story Brand is where I'd start. 5th on the list is Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, The Story of Success. I love this book. It's a fascinating read. If you go the route of a cup of tea with this book, bring cookies because you won't want to get up and get them. In this book, Malcolm looks at the different things that makes really successful people that way, but he approaches it slightly differently than Brendan Burchard. He looks at the things in people's backgrounds, the influences and cultures. He looks at the culture they gain success in, and what role the biases played in gaining that success. This is the book the line about 10,000 hours of practice came from, so obviously he discusses practice versus skill when it comes to being successful at something. He writes in a conversational tone, like he's talking to you, and I love that. If you've ever caught his podcast, you know what I mean. But he researches and speaks to people and gathers all the information, then he puts it together for his conclusions,
which he delivers for you to then make up your own judgment. I don't feel like he thinks things are definitively decreed. He makes his case and he gives it to you to mull over. There are no exercises in this book. There's no massive takeaways to impact your current actions. But not one of us in business is in a vacuum. The world, in all of its complexity, is all around us, and it's impacting us on ways that we haven't yet realized. I see this book as a way for you to consider the world you're operating in and what you're working with and against as you aim for your own success path, whatever that might look like. It's a good book with great stories and things to ponder. And if you like doing those things, you like Malcolm Gladwell, you'll like this book. Book number 6 is a past and future guest of the podcast, Carrie Hales, Transformational Life Coach. I love Carrie. She just keeps evolving, and she does it right in front of our eyes. She's full on going after life. Her book is called Life Lessons from Your Knicker Drawer, and it's based on the metaphor that your life is reflected in the state of your underwear drawer. What I like about this book is that I know we often have things in our past, thoughts and ideas in our heads that we need to sort out before we can move on to the wonderful things that life has in store for us. But that stuff can be super hard to look at in the plain light of day. Carrie approaches these things through your knickers. And that totally doesn't sound right, but it is. It feels easier to sort through a drawer of things that you look at every day to see what's in there and what it represents and make the decision to upgrade. I say it seems easier, but really, it can be actually tough to let some of those go. Carrie holds your hand and she pushes you simultaneously, and you can't help but sigh and go along with her. If you're looking for something to clear the clutter from your life, to start identifying patterns and moving them, if you need an excuse to upgrade your undies, Carrie's Life Lessons from Your Knicker Drawer is what you need to get on your reading list. And because, well, why not? I thought I'd tell you what I'm on the wait list to get. Yes, wait list, because I'm going to use an e-reader. Moving opened my eyes to my massive amounts of books that I own. Well, that I used to own. They were given to happy homes, donated or recycled, and only ones that I reread got packed or put in the trailer for coming with me. The books on this list, if I own them, they came with me. Otherwise, they've been ebooks that I've borrowed and reread as I moved up the wait list. If I really love it, I'll buy or beg a secondhand copy when the opportunity arises. Or someone I love might listen and buy it for me for Christmas, who knows? But the book that I want to read next is Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. I was captivated by Eat, Pray, Love, like so many of us, and I've followed Elizabeth Gilbert, watching her navigate her life and change and evolve, despite the considerable pushback she's received. I love interviews with her because she seems to embrace this freedom of thought and exploration of her thoughts as the true and powerful creative process for her. She says things that inspire me all the time, and this book is where so many of those quotes seem to live. So I want to read that book next. I want to indulge in the necessity of creativity and thinking and dreaming, in magic. And on that mystical note, those are my 6 books I can't recommend highly enough for those of you in business or looking to start a business. High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard, Chillpreneur by Denise Duffield Thomas, You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero, Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and Life Lessons from Your Knicker Drawer by Carrie Hales. All of these, plus the next one on my list, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, are linked in the show notes. So until next week, my friends, have a fan-freaking-tastic rest of your day, and happy reading. Thanks so much for listening this week. I invite you to sign up for my email list or join me in the Connections Coffee and Confidence community on Facebook. Those are the people who get first dibs on any classes or products I create, and they benefit from the extras I can't get into in a podcast format. I also lovingly request that if you've enjoyed this podcast, you leave a review on Apple. When I see a new review, I get so excited I almost spill my cappuccino froth. Almost. And if you're a woman entrepreneur who's ready to get serious about using the power of communications to grow your business, send me an email at janice@janicefogarty.com. All my details are in the show notes. Thank you again for listening today, and I'll chat with you again next week.